So for the past few days, I've been participating in the BattleBit Remastered playtest, which is a Battlefield clone striking a balance between realism and arcade. And man, I went in pretty optimistically because I saw YouTubers talk about it last month, and that quickly developed into an addiction. I clocked in 14 hours in just 3 days. This game is crack cocaine, and I really want to talk about it to the point of me, well, making this video instead of another Final Forces video. Sorry. I found BattleBit to be extremely fun and surprisingly well made, considering that the development team consists of only 3 people. And hell, even with just 3 people, they've managed to develop something more quote-unquote Battlefield than DICE and EA ever could with Battlefield 2042. So in this video, I'll go over what I like about the game, what I don't like, and what I find to just be okay. And as an aspiring game designer, I'd also like to try and offer solutions and suggestions on how to improve this game. So starting with the good stuff, the gameplay in general, the core gameplay is great. The whole anyone can revive thing really encourages team play and staying together, as well as add a bit of a social aspect to the game. Following squad objectives that you get squad points, which even further emphasizes team play and squad play even more than the usual Battlefield games. The movement is smooth and responsive, and generally, like other YouTubers said, you'll find a lot of those only in Battlefield moments that they advertised in Battlefield 2042 but never actually ended up delivering on it. Just a lot of cool stuff happens very organically through other players because the game is just designed that way. As a small tidbit though, I personally love the local chat system thing. You can chat with the enemy. It's very funny. Next, the gunplay feels great. The guns have some pretty satisfying kick to them. There's free aim on hipfire, and the damage model is very realistic. It takes only a few shots to kill someone, and even if you don't hit all of your shots, the bullets cause bleeding, which is great because it discourages, those one-man armies kind of people who rush in solo, and it sort of prevents that sort of playstyle and encourages team play because you have to bandage to stop the bleeding, and not having your team cover you while doing so is usually a death sentence. The attachment system is nice. It's very true to Battlefield in a sense that it gives you quite a bit of customizability, but not too much like Modern Warfare 2019. The focus isn't as much on the gun customization. Although, the stat screen is very detailed and I highly appreciate that. As a final note though, there currently aren't any shotguns in the game. It's not currently really planned because they think it will be too hard to balance. Just so you know. Moving on to probably the highlight of the game, which is destruction. So far, I find this feature to be the best one in the game to offer, as a mechanic that Battlefield doesn't necessarily lean into. The greatest moments I've had in this game all revolve around the usage of the environment and building destruction. Most buildings in this game can be destroyed bit by bit and eventually, with enough damage, actually reduced to a pile of rubble. It adds a layer of strategy and a dynamic feel to the game. At the start you could be fighting over a conquest point in an urban area with lots of buildings, and later into that same game, that same point is now just a bunch of rubble, and you'll have to continually adapt and change how you play the game according to the destruction around you. It's very cool stuff. And the most important part of this is that all the destruction is entirely player driven. Someone sniping you from a comfort of a building to shoot an RPG at it, and now they don't have a wall to take cover from. Cleverly using this system leads to the best gameplay this game has to offer. Like in this clip, I was trying to push this one point on Salhan, where my team was basically forced to go through a long straightaway choke point with almost no cover. But there's a row of buildings alongside of this straightaway, so I decided to just push through this entire building using C4 on each of the walls. And it was such a memorable and amazing experience that only BattleBit was able to provide me with. If the devs really lean into this feature, they could have a game that could stand on its own even without needing the Battlefield clone label. And to end on a smaller note, the devs already have a vision on how the progression is going to go. You can see some of the weapons have high unlock ranks, and there seems to be a prestige system already in place. So you can tell that they've clearly thought this out already. Now, moving on to some of the bad stuff, I'm going to start with team visual clarity. Both teams have near identical or even just straight up identical color schemes. Now, realistically, this makes sense, but in a video game, it breeds confusion. Teammates have blue highlights to them, but when you're close, it's very hard to see it. And what often happens is that people don't realize when an enemy is like right in the middle of a group of their teammates, because you can't easily distinguish between them. And for me, right, the solution to this is very simple, which is to just have different color schemes for different teams. Next, I have some gripes with the lighting and shading in the game. So currently, the lighting and shading in indoor areas is currently too uniform. The foreground blends into the background, and it's kind of hard to tell where walls end into doorways and etc. It's very hard to navigate underground areas and intricate indoor areas because of this. And I believe that adding dynamic lighting and dynamic shadows will address these issues, as well as add a new layer of gameplay. Like for example, on the shipwreck map, someone could shoot out all the lights in the underground B point, and then players would have to use night vision. Things like that. Next is the sound balance. Now, I don't know if anyone else kind of finds this to be an issue, but certain sounds in this game are exponentially louder than others. Like, compared to gunshots, which are, supposed to be pretty loud, building destruction and building collapse are ear-bleedingly loud. They are definitely loud. They're so loud compared to everything else in the entire game. I hope to see this addressed in the next playtest. And finally, I'd like to talk about that 254 player cap. This isn't much of an issue, but I feel like I should address it here. 254 players can be very hit or miss depending on the map, and even how players just move in general. Now, you can't predict how players are going to act and play, and I understand that human nature can just lead 254 players to sometimes be utter mayhem and sometimes work out kind of well. It's just that certain maps and certain points on certain maps just do not fit 254 players. The big example of this is Namak, which is currently a massive meme of the community precisely because of this. It quite literally could barely fit 254 players, and on other maps, having two entire teams fight over a single point is also just hell, total chaos. I believe that giving players an incentive to fight over multiple points in these very large 254 player matches can help alleviate these issues, like, certain squads could get more squad points by capping specific points and so on. Another solution could also be just making the capture points larger in general. Like, not necessarily having to make the whole map bigger, just make the capture zone and the structures around the capture zone, larger. Now, moving on to some of the stuff that I just find to be okay. Firstly, class identity. I find class identity in this game, both visually and gameplay wise, to be pretty good. Each class has its own job, visuals, and utility, all except Assault. Currently, there isn't a good reason to play Assault. I suggest that Assault should be designed to focus on its namesake, which is, Assault. It should be a class that specializes in pushing and killing enemies, since it brings no other special team utility to the table. Perhaps Assault can get a grenade launcher that could fire either high explosives or smoke rounds, maybe give Assault a better grenade throwing range, maybe give Assault an exclusive weapon class, like move the battle rifles out into its separate category and give it to Assault, or maybe when shotguns get added to the game, it could be exclusive to Assault, that kind of stuff. Next, I have some critique on the construction and squad points aspect of the game. Currently, this system in general is kind of okay, but there's a lot of room for expansion. Now, I say this because this whole system is something you see being used, and you just think, yeah, that's neat, but the effect on gameplay is pretty minimal, and when it's not used, you don't really miss it, or you feel like you need it in any way. There needs to be more incentive to using this system, to teach and encourage squad leaders, to give orders to earn squad points, Perhaps the grappling hook could be moved into this construction system because it's a little game breaking. Maybe each class could get a special gadget that is only accessible from squad points, things like that. Overall, my opinion on the game is that it's a great game even in its current state. With more and more content continually being added in the future and this amazing dev team, I can definitely see this game becoming very big in the future. The next playtest begins on April 8th, and once it comes out in early access, it's going to cost $15 with regional pricing. 100%, I'm going to buy this game on release, and hell, I might even support their Patreon beforehand. Definitely keep this game on your radar, and that's all I have for the video. Thank you for watching, and see you on the next playtest. I'll get back to making Phantom Forces video, I promise.